Okay, so for today, we're going to be doing five under the radar movie picks. To set up the parameters we used, once again, like the previous videos, they are non horror picks. Every other genre is fair game, but we specifically are not touching horror. And then we wanted to specify what we meant by under the radar. These are not necessarily underrated movies. These are movies that may be classic movies that have fallen out of love with the modern audience. They may be movies that are more niche, but for the audiences who have seen them, they absolutely love them. They're generally just movies that maybe you might not have heard of, or maybe you happen to have heard of it in passing a decade ago and then it never crossed your mind. Maybe you never saw it, but it was actually really good. So it's not necessarily underrated, but we really do mean like under the radar. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and throw it over to Bryce, and you can get us started.
All right, thank you. Um, Very excited for this list. A lot of these movies are some of my favorite movies of all time, and they're also just great picks. Whenever someone asks you for an under the radar pick, just something you want to give them that they might not have heard of to enjoy their evening when they're looking for some good entertainment. But my honorable mention is when I first watched this movie. I considered it my favorite movie of all time for a while. I still considered it my favorite movie. Now it's kind of just definitely up there in like the top five, top three. Hard to just pick this as my ultimate favorite. But the reason it's an honorable mention is because for a while it was kind of under the radar. But then it got put on Netflix and it was trending at number one on Netflix. So I think it's got a lot more mainstream exposure. Still not as much as it deserved, but that's why I put it as an honorable mention because it did kind of get its little moment on the spotlight on streaming. And that is from 2013, the movie Prisoners. Director Denis Villeneuve was actually his first American film, and it stars Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal. It's got a larger supporting cast that includes Terrence Howard, Viola Davis, Paul Dano, Dylan Minnette. Very star-studded cast. It's a incredibly dark and brutal film. So, sort of a disclaimer: it's not for everyone. You can't be in a negative headspace when you watch this movie, but it is a just buckle up, edge of your seat, gritty crime psychological thriller. The central premise is basically Hugh Jackman plays this working class dad in a small town in Pennsylvania whose daughter goes missing, and they fear that she's been kidnapped or abducted or possibly murdered. And Jake Gyllenhaal plays the detective that's assigned to her case. And basically, Hugh Jackman doesn't think that the case is being done, I guess, to his liking and satisfaction, so he decides to take things into his own hands. So, right off the bat, it sounds very generic. Sounds like something you've seen a lot before. Sure, like on paper, that one or two sentence summary sounds like something that's been done before, but I promise you, this movie is very, very unique and creative. And like I said before, it's just a thrill ride. It's brutal, it's vicious, covers all these really deep themes about vigilantism, about justice and the nature of justice. And it's sort of action, as a parent. Like if you're not a parent, think about if you were a parent. To what, like, how far would you go in order to protect your child from harm? And I think any reasonable person, and including the main characters in the movie, are kind of uncomfortable with how far that answer goes when it comes to protecting a child. But I mean, Hugh Jackman has an Oscar worthy performance. I genuinely think he got snubbed. Definitely his best role, including everything Wolverine, Greatest Showman. Definitely his best role. Jake Gyllenhaal, they play so well together. They definitely had such a great sort of synergy on camera that definitely think needed to be seen more. I'm surprised they haven't collaborated as much together. Um, but it's just heart pounding, top tier thriller. So many little clues and mysteries throughout to get that sort of true crime aspect. If you love true crime, if you like serial killers and mysteries and disappearances, definitely the film for you. And it kind of culminates all together in a very phenomenally pulled off ending. That's just a huge gut punch that makes it just like you just want to like turn the TV off and just sit in the darkness and just let it sink in and be like, whoa. So So yeah, 2013's Prisoners, definitely a top tier psychological thriller true crime movie.
So I knew this was gonna happen, and of course it's happening with the first movie on your list. The I when we like you said this, we were very excited to do this to have this discussion. We were very excited to make these lists. There are so many really good movies, and I absolutely love this movie. So I just want to put that out there. This is a great pick. I probably should have guessed that you would have had this on here. Much like you just talked about, I'm pretty sure I'm one of the people who first watched it during the Netflix Renaissance. There's because I know I didn't watch it when it came out, but it would have been around the same time I watched that the box movie, the one that Joel something, he like wrote, directed, and
Gift.
yeah. Uh, I watched them back to back. It was very solid. Anyway, sorry, that's a weird tangent. But The Gift, yes, thank you. Yeah, no, this is, but yeah, to finish my rant, excuse me. There this is just gonna want to make me have this is going to make me have wanted to make this like a top 10 or a top 20. Like I feel like we could really build out these lists. But no, I won't. I think that everything that you said is completely accurate. This is Hugh Jackman, one of his best roles. Jake Gyllenhaal's awesome. Paul Dano's really good. So yeah, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's anything necessarily to add. Sorry for that random rant.
You're good. It was really the role that I'm familiar with for Paul Dano because I'd never seen There Will Be Blood before the Batman. So when he got like announced as like the Riddler, this was like the only like go by I had, and it just made me think, yeah, I could see him in definitely a role like that. So yeah, if you liked Paul Dano as the Riddler and you want to know where to see more of him, this is a great place.
Yeah, I had only ever seen Paul Dano in comedic roles, so I was very thrown off for Riddler, but I mean I think it worked out well. Um so with my honorable mention, uh uh as you saw in one of the previous videos, I am an absolute mega fan of 1980s action movies. And one of my favorite movies of all time is an 80s action movie that I have on my actual list, which is why the movie I'm about to talk about is the honorable mention. I didn't personally feel like it was good for the list to have two be on there. And so number 6 is 1987's The Running Man. And first, fun fact, this is based on a Stephen King novel, which, if you've seen the movie, makes zero sense. you from what I can gather, the people who made the movie may have never even read his book. Anyway, the way that the movie goes is Richard Dawson of Family Feud fame. He runs this game show essentially where contestants get put into the ring and they have to fight for their life. And there's like a crowd that's like cheering. People are paying money. It's almost like an imagine literally like a game show, like if it was Family Feud, but the families were trying to kill each other, and then it was getting a lot of revenue. And so there is a story, and they were trying to talk about, so the outside world is like this dystopian future and the government is weird, and it's almost like 1984, but it's an 80s action movie, so it's not that intellectual. So it's kind of funny because if you really want to, you can find the story, but generally speaking, this is just to watch Arnold Schwarzenegger murder people and say one-liners while he does it. The all of the people that he fights when he's in the ring are like fever dreams that the director decided to create. It's very fun. This is like something you should watch with your kids or get drunk and have a fun night. Like I just the I went on I'd only seen the classic Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, so like the Terminator, the Predator, stuff like that. And one night my dad was like, "How have you never seen Running Man?" And after my first time watching this movie, I just immediately fell in love. I've seen it 10 plus times since. Whenever I see it on TV, I have to watch it because you don't really have to watch from the beginning. But if I didn't say he's a prisoner, but he's like a good prisoner. And so he's the first running man, quote unquote. That's the name of the game show, who's actually able to compete against the people who are trying to murder him. And that's, of course, how the story happens. But I won't ruin anything else. But it's just if you're looking for fun Arnold Schwarzenegger, this is just like I want to have a happy Sunday.
I've never actually seen this one or read the original novel. I have heard that they are very different. I've heard it's one of those things where the book and the movie are both different, but they're both really good in their own respects. But yeah, not one that I've checked out, but it's both on my reading list and I guess now on my movie watching list to check out.
That highly recommend.
Yeah. Um, I thought you were going to go Cobra for a second when you were talking about underrated 80s action movies. And I hope I didn't spoil anything on your list.
No, I can spoiler alert, I can confirm Cobra's not on my top 5.
Okay. That I haven't seen either. I just see that on lists of underrated 80s action picks, but neither here nor there. Okay. So going into my number 5, I guess in a way this is the closest to a horror movie I have on my list. It is not a horror movie. It is at best a gritty sci-fi psychological thriller, I guess you could say. Um, Definitely a surprise hit. I remember when this hit theaters and like I didn't see it and I don't remember anyone that did see it. I actually watched it originally pirated on like 123 movies or something after I'd heard the chatter afterwards saying it was good, which started like right after it left theaters. So I was like, what am I gonna do now? And it wasn't on any streaming. And I don't know if it's on any streaming now, but if you get a chance to look into it, I definitely recommend. But it is from 2018 and that is Upgrade by
Mm.
written and directed by Lee Winnell, who is one of my favorite creatives working in Hollywood right now. So essentially, like I said, it's like a gritty sci-fi dystopian psychological thriller. It takes place in this near future, which seems nearer and nearer every day, where basically, AI and robotics have sort of start over and more in society. There's like self-driving cars, and people are like cybernetically enhancing themselves to be like physically superior. And it stars Logan Marshall Green, who mini side tangent is one of those actors where you definitely will recognize him when you see him because he's been in a lot of things. He's hardly ever a leading man, and I think he is definitely an underrated actor. And a UT grad, believe it or not. So go Vols. Um, but he's known for being the knockoff Tom Hardy. So maybe that's why he's not in more leading roles. But anyway, I digress. So he plays in this techno future. He plays a sort of tech phobic, AI phobic man who sort of likes the old way of like manual things. And so he's not quite come around to robots and AI yet. And he gets into an accident, and his wife is killed, and he is basically paralyzed from the neck down. But this eccentric tech billionaire gives him the once in a lifetime opportunity to put this AI chip inside of the back of his skull that will help him walk, but it consequently puts this robotic intelligence inside of his head called STEM. And basically, STEM can talk to him in his head and also give him these crazy abilities like downloading fighting styles and superhuman reflexes and things like that. And basically, him and STEM have to team up in order to catch his wife's killer and who the people who paralyzed him and sort of uncover this conspiracy. So it's just an incredibly well directed movie. Especially the action sequences are they get very innovative with the way like the camera moves with the movements and the way the action shot because you think he's literally like downloaded like a black belt's worth of like kung fu in his head and can just do this now because this AI is connected to his central nervous system. But beyond that, I mean, it's a very interesting universe and a lot of lore there to explore. If I remember correctly, there was talk of like I think it was an Amazon wanted to do like a series set in this universe. I'm not sure if that ever took off, but I remember hearing something about it. Definitely is ripe for some sort of spinoff like that. But really what I think I respect most about it is it's just like a perfect like mid budget thriller that I think that we need. It's like $50 million or something. Just really good, very creative with its money. It's not some like $300 million blockbuster and it's not some like cheap $1 million indie movie. It's just somewhere in between. Like I said, Logan Marshall Green is a very underrated actor. He's great in this leading role. He doesn't get to be a leading role often, and it just has an excellent twist. And just like Prisoners, just a bunch of an ending where it just makes it like sit in, like wow, that just happened. It just went there. So it definitely pulled it off perfectly, tied it all in a nice little, neat little bow. So yeah, I just think it's just a perfect. It's like 90 minutes, 100 minutes, little mid-budget thriller kind of movie that I think we need right now.
Yeah, once again, I completely concur. Sorry that we don't have as much disagreement as in previous videos, but it's interesting. When I first watched this, I didn't like it. However, after the second viewing, I liked it a lot more. It was one of those where it was just, I mean, in my opinion, I guess it was better on the second viewing, and I'm sure if I was to watch it a third time, it would be good as well. There's so much stuff that, like, with the second viewing, you get so much more of the layers, and it just made me like it that much more. I'm also a sucker for tech movies just because I work in tech, and so I always love seeing I'll just use your phrase. It's a future that might not be so far away. So I don't know. It's just always interesting to me when a creator will philosophize about where we could be if society took blank direction or whatever, and it doesn't have to have that, but if you want, it can have some fun philosophical conversations after you're done watching the movie. So yeah, completely agree. This one's solid. And I also agree that Logan Marshall Green is a very underrated actor. I know that we're not really touching like horror slash adjacent, but The Invitation's definitely one of my favorite like under the radar movies if horror was allowed. I don't know how you would classify it. I definitely consider it to be horror, but that's besides the point.
I also consider that one horror. And that is also a good one. I think the people always say it's like the better Venom of 2018 because you have two actors that look incredibly similar and they both came out in 2018 and they're both about voices inside their head that give them cool abilities. And I think that Upgrade completely blows Venom out of the water. So yeah, it's the better Venom of 2018.
That's a great way to end there because that's fair. I hadn't heard that. That's very funny. Um, so my number five is 2001's The Last Castle. And I think I may have said this in a previous video. Now I'm much better. I do enjoy dramatic movies. Growing up, I hated them. There was one drama I liked, and it was The Last Castle. So, to kind of prep what the story is, Robert Redford essentially plays the greatest general to ever exist in the American military. However, because of one mistake, he is then sent away to military prison. He's sent away to The Last Castle. The Last Castle is run by the warden, played by James Gandolfini. And in my personal opinion, this is his best role that he's done. I've seen a lot of James Gandolfini movies and shows just because that's my dad's favorite actor, and I think this is just the best. And where the story comes from is, as I mentioned, Redford's the greatest general to ever exist, and Gandolfini idolizes him, but also he's the warden. He needs to be running this prison as the general, and all of the inmates would prefer Redford. And there's a lot of stuff that happens with the dynamics, and it's essentially the entire thing is just you're seeing the power shift. Because originally Redford's all depressed. He's like, oh, I made this mistake. I'm gonna just serve my time. I'm gonna pretend I'm not even here. And like then it kind of shifts, and then the same thing with Gandolfini and the I also it features a young Mark Ruffalo, which is just random, but he's a fun character. The movie also does a really good job of building tension from start to finish. So it's a little over 2 hours, and the first hour and a half is I feel weird calling it a bottle story, but it is because it just the only thing you see is this prison. Obviously, it has a bunch of prisoners, so I'm being lenient with the term bottle story, but you're following these prisoners for an hour and a half plus as the tension builds between the prisoners and Gandolfini. And then the last 20 to 30 minutes is the gigantic like climax where stuff happens in the prison. I don't want to spoil it, but it's just it's I'm not necessarily recommending it for that action. I'm recommending it because if you're a Gandolfini fan, I think this is his best role. I have seen some Robert Redford stuff. I know he's a famous actor. I know he did Sundance. But generally speaking, this is like the one movie that I really like him in. I think he's really good in this. And I love just their dynamic. And once again, there's a lot of philosophical stuff that they make you ponder about, specifically with like the military. So, if that's something that you're into or just want to, go down that path, then I definitely recommend this movie.
I think I've heard you mention this like once or twice over the years, but honestly, outside of that, I don't think I've even heard of this movie, which is surprising to me. I just looked it up on IMDb. Um, yeah, I think, like I said, I thought I'd heard you mention this like maybe once or twice, but outside of that, really, like I have not heard of this, but it definitely sounds like something I would really like, just everything you described, especially like the bottle story part. I think I'd reflected a couple episodes ago that I love bottle stories. So I think that I would definitely like this. I don't have any experience with James Gandolfini. I don't really have much experience with Robert Redford either, but it definitely sounds like, they're notorious actors. So if they were great in these roles, then definitely sounds like something I would need to check out.
Yes, I wholeheartedly recommend, and I also recommend it as somebody who, quote unquote, doesn't like drama. I liked this movie. So if you're one of those people, I think you should still try it.
Well, I like dramas, so I will definitely try and check it out. Um, okay. So my number four is a go-to feel-good movie for me. It's a movie that I think it had like a decent amount of buzz when it came out, but I feel like no one really talks about it now. And it's surprising when you consider that it's from director Danny Boyle, who's known for a lot of things like Train Spotting and 28 Days Later, things such as, but in, it is 2019's Yesterday. So the central premise of this movie is there is this young fellow, we'll say like mid 20s, maybe late 20s, named Jack, who lives in England, and he is an aspiring musician who hasn't quite made it yet. And he is obsessed with the Beatles, and he basically like plays Beatles cover songs, and he wants to get big, but he's working like a dead end, like minimum wage job. But he just dreams of being famous. And one day he gets hit by a bus, and he wakes up and finds himself in this world where the Beatles never existed, and he is the only one that remembers the Beatles and all of their songs. So he takes it upon himself to preserve their music by remembering their songs, writing down the music, writing down the lyrics, and basically markets them as his songs because this world doesn't know that the Beatles existed. And he becomes this international sensation, and rightfully so, playing the Beatles songs for the first time in 2019. And he just becomes just this sensation, and he gets to taste what fame is like and sort of learn some lessons along the way about whether or not being famous was what he wanted all along. So you can already start to see where like the feel good aspects come in, why it could have some good messaging. I just find it so enjoyable. I think Jack is a very likable protagonist. He's played by Himesh Patel, who outside of this, I mean, he was like in Tenet, like very briefly with Christopher Nolan, but I don't think he's really been in anything like major. This was like a starring role for him. I think he's great. Um, I wrote down Lily Collins. I'm not sure if it's Lily Collins or Lily
Lily
James. Admittedly,
James.
I get it is Lily James. Okay.
Yeah.
I get them both very confused, but they have an amazing, like one of the best actor actress, romantic chemistries I think I've seen. But it's just a genuinely good story about a very likable character who just has a great character journey about, everyone wants to be famous, but he gets a taste of what being famous is like. And it's like, does he actually want to be famous? And I feel like it just answers a question that a lot of us have thought. And I'm not a particular, I mean, I've listened to like the Beatles hits, but I'm not like a deep cut Beatles fan. I don't even listen to them that much. So like I'm not like obsessed with like that end of it. But I think the covers that even Himesh Patel himself is singing as the character of Jack are really quite good. And so the movie's got really good music in it. It's got this really genuine, natural sense of humor that's like really organically funny. Um, and yeah, it just has some really great emotional deep cuts in it, and definitely makes you feel something. This is like my go-to, like if I'm ever having like a bad day or like a sad period in my life. It's a movie that genuinely cheers me up because I just find it very uplifting and just like a very I said it had a lot of deep emotional cuts, but I think overall great movie that you can kind of just overall just put on and just have a good time throughout.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I have not seen this movie. You're going to find this funny because you know my past, but I don't really like musicals. Um, I
Me
enjoyed.
neither.
Oh, okay. I enjoyed them growing up, but nowadays they're just not really what I flock to. That could change, of course, and maybe I'll watch this in the future. Um, but yeah, so I remember seeing the trailers for this. I can see how this would be under the radar because once it came out, I kind of stopped hearing about it, so that makes sense. I'm glad to hear it was a good movie, and this is going to be a hot take, but I personally think if the Beatles didn't exist and then they came out today, I don't think they'd personally be as popular as they were back then. Like I don't think the fame and fortune of that level could be replicated. Once again, could be completely wrong. That's probably a hot take. I know a bunch of people are Beatles fans, but I think it has more to do with the legacy and what they did at that time. Like I feel so just going I feel like if they were to do it today, it wouldn't go the same.
I mean, I agree, and even the movie kind of dives into that a little bit.
Okay.
I didn't even mention like one of the other major ideas it sort of plays with is like the importance of art. Like, Jack sort of goes into it initially with, um, you know, good intentions, but then gets lost in his way. And he sort of realizes at the end, like the most important thing isn't that he get rich and famous off this music. It's that the music is out there because like millions of people will resonate with it and enjoy it. And it sort of just touches on these great ideas about like the importance of art when it just comes to like who people are and like who humans are and like how important it is to like our culture and our societies. So yeah, just very great themes, very just great emotions. So I definitely recommend if you're looking for like a, relatively light, just sort of like feel good movie.
I like that message. Looking at it here, it's not currently on a streaming service that I own, so I'll catch it if it's on. But I think actually considering that last part there, you kind of won me over. Now I want to see it.
For sure.
um Okay, so sticking with the drama, my number four is 1992's School Ties, starring Brendan Fraser, Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, and Chris O'Donnell. And I know what you're thinking. Holy 90s! um, so the big thing to note with this is that this is pre Goodwill Hunting. So I know that like a lot of people tend to think that Matt Damon and Ben Affleck they like came onto the scene Goodwill Hunting, that was like their launch, and to an extent yes that was. However, they had been doing stuff beforehand and they're actually really good in School Ties. So if you like those actors alone, I recommend the movie. Now for what the movie's about. So Brendan Fraser is a blue collar, poor, just hardworking dude who's a teen, and he is this star QB. Like he is going to go pro. And so a private school that is Christian decides that they want him to play for their football team because their football team sucks and they want their team to be good. Now, this takes place in 1959 when the merging of religions was highly frowned upon. So the deal is that Brendan Fraser gets to go to the school, gets to get the education. It's very prestigious. He's going to get basically a free ride to Harvard because he's going to graduate from this prestigious prep school. In exchange, the school gets their star QB. They're going to go undefeated. They're going to win the championship. They're going to beat their rivals. But the deal is he has to say that he's Christian. He has to go to church. He has to do all of the things that are required to be a Christian and like prove to the other, like the other classmates cannot know that he is Jewish. And so the first part of the story is very fun when he keeps his secret. Of course, it eventually comes out that he is Jewish, and then it deals with a lot of those types of things. Once again, I know it's 1959, but in my personal opinion, I feel like a lot of the stuff is still relative to today. So there are ways for people to relate to it. And even with that being said, it's still a good movie. Like when stuff because it's not just about the anti-Semitism. It's not just about like Christian versus Judaism. It's also about rich versus poor. It's about the like the things that go on at a private school. As someone who went to a private school, I personally related to that. There's a lot of stuff that goes on inside the school that doesn't go on at public. So it's an interesting, like, even that's a thing, public versus private. So it kind of connects all of these different types of stories together while also just being a good story. As I mentioned, Brendan Fraser's great, Matt Damon's great, Ben Affleck's great. Chris O'Donnell, I mean, don't get me wrong, love him as Robin, but this is probably the best role I've Actually, you know what? Because he's really good as D'Artagnan. Okay, it's a toss up whether Chris O'Donnell's best in this or is best in Three Musketeers. But either
think
way,
he's best in CSI Miami or whatever he's in.
NCIS Los Angeles.
That one.
Fun fact on that show at the end of like season 2, because that's when I still watched it, he gets shot like 37 times because they wanted to kill off his character, but then the fans got mad, so he just survives and has been on the show for like 13 seasons. But he literally gets shot like 30 plus times.
So I'm trying to think if he was like way too old to play a teenager in in Batman Forever. This was only a couple years before that. I imagine he still looks way too old to be playing a high schooler.
Yeah, you can definitely tell that you can tell. So let's see here. Batman and Robin was 1997, so this is 5 years before that.
Well, even that he was in
Um
Batman Forever in 1995.
Yeah, that's true. Nah,
It
yep.
was only
So 3 years
3 years
before
out.
that, and Three
Dang. Yeah.
Musketeers was 93. So he did this before D'Artagnan.
Interesting. Yeah, this is a movie, I've never seen it, but I've heard a lot about it. I honestly didn't know that this is what this was about. I always figured it was just like sort of like a fast time high sort of thing, which I know you said you didn't like, so that's why I was like a little bit surprised. But that actually sounds like it's got a really good like story,
Yeah, it's
really good like
also
messaging.
Cole Hauser is the other student. I had to learn who Anthony Rapp is a student. I had to I was thinking of Cole Hauser's face and I couldn't think of his name. Just to name a couple of other characters in the cast. But yeah, it's great. There's two scenes specifically that in my personal opinion are just awesome and they will stick with me forever, and they're just very memorable. You don't even have to relate to what the people are going through in the story. They're just very memorable scenes. They're very solid. So yeah, just overall, it's a good movie. This is one of the ones that I mentioned that when it first came out, people really liked it, but I think it's just kind of fallen by the wayside. All of these actors went on to be very big and do other things, and it just kind of is like the forgotten gem.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely will have to check that one out as well. Um, okay. So my number three, the oldest movie on this list, all the way back in 2007, and seems like forever ago. Um, is a goat. Basically, my list has basically been heavily overweighted towards thrillers. I do enjoy thrillers, but I'm just not realizing, like in my notes, I just had thriller, thriller, thriller. Anyway, a go-to recommendation for like a good thriller. I do think out of all of my picks, this might be the one that is the most under the radar because I genuinely have not met another person that has actually seen this movie. So it is a thriller, sort of crime thriller from 2007 called The Next 3 Days. This was put on Netflix. I don't know if it was trending at number one, so maybe it has gotten a little bit more mainstream. But I genuinely have not heard of another person been able to talk to someone that has seen this. So it stars Russell Crowe. It also has Elizabeth Banks, Liam Neeson, a couple other supporting cast. And the central premise is Russell Crowe and Elizabeth Banks are a couple, and Elizabeth Banks is framed for murder. We, as the audience, do not know if she actually did it or not, but she's been I know I said framed. That was actually misspeaking. That wasn't getting anything away either. It is presented as if she did commit a murder. We, as the audience, do not know if she committed a murder or not. And she gets put in jail and prison. And Russell Crowe is just like your average regular guy. I don't think he's like an architect or something. He's just like some regular job, no hard edges or anything. He basically decides he's going to learn how to break his wife out of prison. So the whole movie is him having to sort of get that tough edge going from like suburban family man to meeting with criminals, meeting with former prisoners, going to sketchy places at night to get like illegal weapons that aren't going to be registered, and concocts this really intricate plan to pick up these skills in order to get his wife out of prison. And to be completely honest, it makes you feel like you could do it. Like the way it's all laid out, you're like, man, everything just fell into place. Like this looks like I could break someone out of prison. So that's just done very well. But just got great pacing for a thriller. That's obviously something you look for in a thriller. So much well executed tension and suspense. And it definitely comes to a very satisfying resolution that I won't say how that goes. But yeah, I just think it's a really creative concept. It puts Russell Crowe in a very interesting role where it's not actiony at all, and he actually plays somewhat of just like I said, like a very suburban, tame person. It's not like an action thriller or anything, um, but puts him in sort of a different kind of role. So he's great. Elizabeth Banks is great. Liam Neeson is sort of a minor role, but he is in it, and of course he's great as well. And it all just comes together, just a very intricately and delicately structured thriller that I highly recommend, and I do think it is the most underrated or under the radar on my list.
So this one's interesting because when Unhinged came out, I absolutely loved that movie. It made me fall in love with Russell Crowe, and then I went on a journey watching like all of his movies. And when I mentioned it to you, you were like, "Hey, you should watch The Next 3 Days." And originally the synopsis didn't necessarily woo me, but when you said it does a really cool job of making you think that you could do it, I was intrigued. So then I watched it, and I concur. This is a really good movie.
So you
Now
did watch it since we last talked.
yes, so I have
Okay,
watched
all
it.
right.
You won me over when you because when you said it makes you feel like you could do it, that made me really intrigued on how the writers did it because I don't know, that just like I enjoy when they do stuff like that. Like I know this is a really terrible parallel, but if you remember in the previous video, I was talking about how Die Hard was such a big hit because Bruce Willis is so relatable. It makes you feel like you could stop a robbery like once again really bad comparison, but I really enjoy when the characters are relatable, the story is relatable. It kind of makes you feel like, ooh, I don't know, maybe this is actually realistic. It's not just a movie. So yeah, that was the but I also think I was partly biased because I absolutely love Russell Crowe now. um
Too.
I think
He's
he's a
one of
really
my
good
top.
actor.
He's one of my top. I'd say maybe five actors, honestly.
I don't know how I went so long not like the only thing I had really seen him in was The Nice Guys, which I think is an under the radar movie in and of itself. Um, but or at least underappreciated. Like I know it was a really big movie, but then it just kind of died, and so I don't know. Or I should say big as in they put a bunch of budget into it. But yeah, so Unhinged made me love him, and then I went on a journey watching all of his stuff that made probably everybody else love him because I don't want to say he's washed now, but I feel like he's not in as much stuff as he used to be.
Think you can agree with me. Like I really don't hear anyone who knows this movie. I've mentioned it so many times, even like in movie circles, and like people haven't seen this movie.
This is definitely, I would never have known what it was if you hadn't said, hey, you should watch it, and if I hadn't been actively trying to watch all of Russell Crowe's movies. If I didn't say this for the audience, when I discover an actor I really like, I purposely go to IMDb and will watch every movie they've been in just because I love that actor. I know that's probably not I thought that may sound weird, but if I wasn't trying to watch Russell Crowe, I would have no idea what the heck this movie was.
Real quick tangent, how I saw it by total random chance. So I don't know if they do this anymore, but it was during the initial quarantine of COVID back in like April and May of 2020. There's a store called Bull Moose. It's a chain up in New England, and they do like physical media. I'm a big physical media collector. And they have an online store, a very prominent online store where you can buy things and they'll ship it to you. But they had this deal where they called it a Blu-ray mystery disc pack, and you could pay $5 for 5 discs. Now the catch was they were literally just the discs, so I had to buy like on Amazon like cases to put them in. But they would literally just pay $5 and they give you 5 random Blu-ray discs, and this was one of them. And that's how I first found this movie. I genuinely would not have been able, it wouldn't be put on Netflix for like another 2 or 3 years after that. I genuinely would not have been able to find it. So Bull Moose came in clutch and gave me one because they gave me like ones I already had. This was like one of the only ones I didn't have. And it was a very welcome surprise. So thank you, Bull Moose, for surprising me with a really good pick.
Real quick to continue with your tangent. So that's an awesome story, and I have a bunch of those from when I was younger. Would you agree that that sort of serendipitous finding of a movie is less common nowadays? And what I mean by that is I'm old enough to have gone to Blockbuster and like kind of done the whole physical media thing. I really love going to like bargain stores and going to like the $1 bin and just seeing what movies have cool covers, like kind of stuff like that. But I feel like nowadays a lot of people kind of just see the trailer, go to see what's in theaters or whatever's being shoved to the front of Netflix. Like even I will dig really deep into Netflix to find the like I don't know stuff at the bottom that might be like I don't know, but I personally feel like that sort of like serendipitous finding of a really good movie isn't necessarily as common because of how everything's online, and it's more we're more likely to just click on what's being shoved in front of us on that top page.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. But I'm trying to keep it as alive as I personally can.
I like it. Okay, moving on to my number three. No more drama. We're going into comedy. So, um, this is probably one of my actually not probably. This is for sure one of my top 5 favorite comedies of all time. This is 2001's Not Another Teen Movie. I absolutely love parody movies. And this was kind of like the start of all of those ones that we knew when we were younger, like epic movie and date movie and all that stuff. Not Another Teen Movie came before all of that. This stars a super young Chris Evans, as well as a bunch of other actors who would go on to be famous, which is very ironic to me because of the stuff they do in this movie. As an example, well, actually, first, let me say the point of Not Another Teen Movie is as a lot of us know, the 80s and 90s were filled with these extremely famous romantic movies. You think like 16 Candles, She's All That, Pretty in Pink, stuff like that. And so, if you've seen any of those movies, if you happen to be a fan, you will love this movie. It parodies all of them. But it's also not another teen movie, so it'll also take some famous teen movies from the 80s and 90s and just puts them together. And then, of course, because it's a parody movie, it's super raunchy. Um, like they literally do Cruel Intentions, which I just think is really funny. But yeah, the reason why I say it's kind of funny that Chris Evans is so young, if you've ever seen the famous movie Varsity Blues, you may know that Ali Larter there's the famous scene where she puts whipped cream on her boobs. So in this movie, since Chris Evans is trying to woo a girl, he puts whipped cream on his penis and then puts a banana, and he walks into the room and he's like mimicking the famous Varsity Blues scene, and it's just so funny. Although, unlike a lot of actors when they hit big, Chris Evans has actually like embraced this movie. He's not like tried to make people not watch it, so respect to him. But I absolutely a lot of the parody movies I kind of from like this time period, this 2000s, I've gone back and watched, and they haven't really held up for me as I've gotten older. But Not Another Teen Movie is just hilarious. It completely holds up to me. All the jokes are even more funny now because there's some jokes I didn't even get when I was a kid. And so part of it's probably nostalgia, but also if you're a fan of those like 80s, 90s romance rom-com, it's great.
Yeah, I might just go like 6 for 6 on your list of ones that I haven't seen. Yeah, I have not seen this one. I have seen that famous still of Chris Evans with the whipped cream on his crotch. That's iconic. I'm pretty sure that was his casting photo, probably for the Human Torch or Captain America, probably. Um, is it the same people that like is it like the same producers or directors or whatever that do like all those other movies, like Scary Movie, Disaster Movie? Do you know?
No, it's not. So disaster movie, epic movie, date movie, all of those are done by the same people. The scary movie is separate, and then not another team movie was separate.
Okay.
The I forget there are these two dudes that are kind of like a Trey Parker and whoever the other guy is South Park, and they do all
Um,
of the like date movie, epic movie, disaster movie, those ones. Not another team movie just happens to exist. Ironically, it came out around the same time as I Know What You Did Last Friday the 13th. Scream if you know, shriek if you know what I did last Friday the 13th. The one that was like a scary movie spin-off, but it was its own thing. But in so like how scary movie overarching is Scream, and then of course it has a bunch of stuff. Shriek if you know what it did last Friday the 13th is I Know What You Did Last Summer overarching. Not another team movie I should have prefaced. The primary like overarching story is She's All That. So if you've watched any romance movie ever, you may be familiar with the main character is probably a girl who they have specifically made look all dumpy, but you can tell that because it's an actress, she's super attractive and is eventually going to become hot. So they purposely cast this hot girl as the main person, but they make a joke that because she's in a ponytail and glasses, she's unattractive. Like they literally drive home, they're like, "Oh, no, I can't date her. She's wearing a ponytail." Like it's very funny. But the the story of She's All That is Freddie Prinze Jr. essentially is like the hot kid in school, and he says that he could make anybody else popular, and the boys dare him to basically go out with the what they deem to be like the dumpiest girl in school, played by Rachel Lee Cook. And it's of course a romance story, so they end up falling for each other and yada yada. In this movie, it's that, but Chris Evans gets dared to do it with, I believe her name is Kyler Lee, and she ended up going on to be Supergirl's sister in CW Supergirl.
oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, definitely. I'm not too big on parody movies, but maybe this is one that maybe this would change my mind.
At least if you like the movies that it's referencing, I think it makes really good fun of those movies.
I have not seen a lot of those, so maybe I'd have to hold off for now. But yeah, definitely. I'm gonna have to check that out. Um, okay. So my number two is a underseen Clint Eastwood movie from 2019. I know a lot of his later work has not been as popular, but being a Clint Eastwood movie, you'd think it would have been more popular than it was. Based on a really interesting true event. It's uh, Richard Jewell, like I said, from 2019. This is based on a true story at the 1996 Atlanta Olympics. Richard Jewell being the main character, played by Paul Walter Hauser. Uh, Very underappreciated actor. I mean, he's been in like Black Klansman, The Five Bloods. He's been in quite a few things, but he's a leading man here. He does great in the role. But he plays this real life character, Richard Jewell, who was a security guard for the Olympics in 1996 in Atlanta. He was a wannabe cop. He always wanted to be a cop, but he never made the cut. And basically, he finds a bomb at Centennial Park in Atlanta that he basically becomes this hero because he finds the bomb. It does go off, and some people get injured and die, but basically would have been a lot worse had he not intervened. And he sort of at first becomes this media darling where he's like the hero, but then the FBI makes him their number one suspect. And the narrative gets quickly switched into, well, he's a wannabe. He wanted to be the hero. He probably planted that bomb in order to look like the hero. And the media just switches on a dime and just tears this man's life apart. And Paul Walter Hauser just plays such a compelling main character. He's just so likable and so charismatic, and he has like a heart of gold. And you just like totally resonate with him, and it just breaks me every time I watch it because you just get to see him get torn down by the media and by the public, and it really just emphasizes the whole movie, just emphasizes, the power of the press and narrative, and also goes into a lot of stuff about how law enforcement handles things because they basically just makes him their prime suspect because the honest truth was they just had no other leads and they just needed a fall guy. So you see a lot of corruption in the FBI, and that always makes it super compelling when it's a true story. His mom is played by Kathy Bates, who's great. His lawyer is played by Sam Rockwell, another underappreciated actor. The lead FBI agent on the case, who's a total douchebag, is John Hamm, but I think he plays that sort of corporate, FBI douchebag character very well. Olivia Wilde's in there too, just like a lot of star-studded cast. And for a Clint Eastwood movie with that sort of cast, very surprising it didn't get much of a bigger splash. But I love based on true events movies. It's one of my favorite subgenres ever, and this is definitely. I haven't quite ranked those, but this might be my favorite based on a true event movie. So yeah, definitely worth checking out if you like true events, if you like crime thrillers, FBI sort of thing, real life events, real life dramas, current events. Definitely the film to check out.
Yeah, this is one that has been at the top of my list for a while. It doesn't come on streaming services, so I'm kind of having a hard time finding it to watch. But I've actually heard nothing but great things about this. The people who I know who have seen it rave about it. They say it's great. I personally love Rockwell and Ham. I think they're great actors, so I would probably like it for them alone. Quick side note on Paul Walter Hauser. I concur completely. This dude is an amazing actor. Uh, quick ramble. If you haven't seen Blackbird, highly recommend it. It's a limited series where Paul Walter Hauser plays this famous serial killer named Larry Hall, who essentially confessed, but it was because he had a dream. So then he ended up going back on it and saying that it was a dream. He's innocent. So while in prison, they do a sting where actual con man James Keene has to befriend Larry Hall and get him to confess. That's all I'll say, but if you like Paul Walter Hauser, highly recommend it. He plays an amazing serial killer. Back to Richard Jewell. Sorry for that random side note, but I wanted an excuse to rave about Paul Walter Hauser because I know we were talking about Logan Marshall Green. I think Paul Walter Hauser's got to be at the top of the list or at least one of the top people for like underrated actors. He's just so good. I wanted to give him some praise. Long story short, I know it was long. I need to watch this movie.
100%. Um, yeah, it's just, like I said, I love based on true event stories, and it's such a compelling true event story. And I think, even going on the under the radar aspect, I think a true event that it's about, like the 1996 Olympic bombing. Like, people might remember the bombing, maybe not so much now or like the new generation, but I think a lot less people remember the media crucifying Richard Jewell after the bombing. I think most people now just remember the bombing itself. So even as an event, it doesn't seem, or it seems like it's a very like under the radar event to cover, because I remember watching it and being like, man, I like history, I like current events, I like modern history, and I knew about the bombings, but I didn't know about any of this. So it's just like a really cool way to like even just learn about, recent history and stuff.
I would agree. So my parents, they actually met at the 96 Olympics. So I knew about this because they've told me, but it's not like I saw it anywhere else. I didn't know the full story or anything like that, so I completely concur about the how it's something just cool to learn about in history. Um so yeah, this is one I'm definitely going to have to watch. So moving on to my number 2. So earlier, I mentioned that my honorable mention was an 80s action flick that I didn't feel right putting in the list because I already had another one on there. It's my number 2 because, don't get me wrong, there's a bunch of really good 80s movies. There are tons of ones that I could watch. However, kind of like you were talking about with yesterday, when I just want to feel good, I want to watch a movie, I want to have fun, I go to 1985's Commando. in my opinion, this is like the most underrated, under the radar, just Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, 80s action movie. This movie's just the pinnacle of everything that you want from the genre. It follows every stereotype perfectly, which I know may sound like a bad thing, but it's not, I promise. So, you have Arnold Schwarzenegger who plays John Matrix. Arnold Schwarzenegger, probably the greatest 80s action hero, playing John Matrix. Just that name alone. Oozes macho. Then the his daughter, played by Alyssa Milano, this was actually her first movie. She gets kidnapped, and Arnold Schwarzenegger has to, or sorry, John Matrix has to go on, 80s action shenanigans in order to get her back. And the one-liners are just chef's kiss. Like the fighting sequences are exactly what you want for an 80s movie. There's literally a scene where Arnold Schwarzenegger drives into a military surplus store and does the I'm going to grab every gun possible and load up, and you see him holding like 8 different guns. He's got a rocket launcher on his back. He's got grenades everywhere. He does the pose. Then all of a sudden all the guns are just gone in the next scene. And there's also the classic I'm going to stand out in the open because I'm going to look cool shooting a gun while all the bad guys are hidden behind cover, but they're not going to hit me, but I'm going to hit them. So, like, I know this may be a complete turnoff to some people, but for me, if you happen to be a fan of 80s action movies, I cannot recommend this enough. It is so much fun. I wish this movie got more love. It is. I'll die on the hill for this movie.
I mean, it's simple movie physics, man. I mean, you just can't get hit, and that's just how it goes if you're the main character.
The
Um,
It is also worth noting a lot of really famous Arnold Schwarzenegger one-liners are from this movie, and people don't know it. Whenever I see people quoting Arnold, they'll quote Commando and then say it was like Terminator or something, and it makes me mad. Just like as a random side, ironically, Bill Duke, who's one of the bad guys, also is in Predator with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the female in the movie, because of course he has to have a love interest, is Ray Dawn Chong, who is Tommy Chong's daughter. Just as like a random fun fact.
yeah, I think I might go 6 for 6 on your list. I've not seen this either. Mostly what I hear is it in the context of like it's like the lost Schwarzenegger movie, like between Terminator and Predator. Because I think it came out in like what you said, 85 or 86?
85.
85. So yeah, like right in the middle, like coming off Terminator, but hasn't quite hit Predator yet. It's like one of those lost movies. So yeah, definitely one I think um has the best chance at me watching the soonest because it seems like something I'd resonate with the most out of your list so far. Um, and definitely just been one that I've been meaning to check out. But I mean, with a name like John Matrix, I mean, I have to.
It's there's actually uh there's an ongoing debate of like who's better, John McClane or John Wick or John Rambo, and I'm always like, what about John Matrix?
I need to make a very gritty modern legacy sequel where he's like 80 years old.
If you haven't seen uh crap. That movie he did with like the whole SNL crew, Killing Gunther, I think is what it was called. Killing Gunther is basically if a bunch of really bad assassins were hunting John Matrix, so that kind of counts, but it's a comedy.
Okay. Yeah, maybe they'll do like a Rambo Last Blood, but for Commando.
I'd be 100% down. If I remember correctly, didn't Arnold Schwarzenegger get hired to be like the head of action for Netflix or something?
I know he's doing a lot, I think, at Netflix, but I'm not sure exactly about the specifics of that.
I will start a petition to get a Commando legacy sequel with 80-year-old Arnold
Commandos.
Schwarzenegger. There you go.
Yeah, just add the S money sign at the end.
Yes, it has to be a money sign.
So yeah, definitely will have to check that out if I'm ever in an 80s action mood. So, all right. My number one, drum roll, It's a movie. This is definitely like I think my go-to recommendation. If people are like, "Hey, hit me with an under the radar pick," this is definitely the one I think I find myself recommending the most. Um, Another one that I think got more love when it got put on Netflix. I think it got taken off Netflix, but for a while it was. So maybe Netflix is doing some good work getting some of these under the radar picks there, at least the more modern ones. So it's from 2011 and it is Warrior. Um, it's from director Gavin O'Connor, who's most known for Miracle, like the Miracle on Ice movie, for The Accountant with Ben Affleck, for The Way Back with Ben Affleck, also a good under the radar pick. But it stars Tom Hardy and Joel Edgerton as these two brothers who Nick Nolte is their dad, and he was a former boxer, and he raises his sons like when they were little to be fighters. And there was basically a big split where he was an alcoholic when they were growing up and they had a terrible family life and they got divorced. One brother went to live with the mom, one brother stayed with the dad and had to keep enduring the abuse. And we're now in the present. And Joel Edgerton is a more straight laced high school teacher with a family and a nice house that he's about to lose. And Tom Hardy is sort of the ne'er do well who never quite got his footing, who joined the Marines but got kicked out of the Marines and basically wants to raise money for a fellow service member who died in combat and his family needs money. And Nick Nolte now has completely changed. He's like a born again Christian. He's no longer an alcoholic. He's trying to make amends with his sons. And basically, this MMA tournament comes up, an amateur MMA tournament, and the winner gets $250,000. And both of the brothers have a strong history of being fighters, and they both are in desperate need of money. And so they decide to enter into the tournament, but obviously you can't work as a team. And of course, I guess as you can guess, and it's not really a spoiler because it's on the cover of everything and the poster for everything, but they end up going against each other. So definitely duking out a lot of family baggage and a lot of family trauma in the form of MMA. Now, on the surface, the fight scenes on this are incredible. I think Gavin O'Connor, especially, does these sorts of films well, where the action just looks great. It's genuinely some of the best hand-to-hand combat I think I've seen, and it's like legit MMA. Like they had like MMA like advisors and instructors like training Joel Edgerton and Tom Hardy on it. Nick Nolte actually got an Oscar nomination for this, and I think he definitely deserved it. Tom Hardy wasn't even really that famous yet. Like Inception had come out, but he wasn't quite Bane yet. So like he was sort of out there, but still not quite famous. And Joel Edgerton is another actor that I feel like is very under the radar, and underrated. But it's an incredibly emotional movie. It has a lot of real stakes, a lot of emotional stakes. You really get invested in like this family and the trauma that they endured and these brothers just like duking it out. Um, Coming head to head and just who's going to win? Who do you want to win more? Who needs it more? Are they going to forgive each other? Are they going to continue to hate each other? It's got a great score that goes along with it, gets you really invested. It feels deeply personal because it is a small scale movie. But even as someone who doesn't watch MMA, it gets you really invested in like the world of MMA and professional fighting. And so like I know MMA, technically it's a sport, so I say it's my favorite sports movie. I know some people are like, hey, it has to be about baseball, basketball, football, whatever. No, this is my favorite sports movie. Calling it right here, but definitely an under the radar pick that I think everyone needs to watch if you just want a good sort of, I don't know, family drama might be underselling how deep it goes, but just a good story like that. It's definitely a go-to. So yeah, my number one movie that I recommend as an under the radar pick.
Yeah, this Joel Edgerton just came full circle because I led off with the gift, so that's kind of funny. But I should have guessed that this one was going to be on here. I guessed Prisoners would have been your number one, so I did not get that one. Um, this one is this one is one that I have not seen, so I don't want to comment. I know you've recommended it before. I haven't watched it. This I know this as I mentioned, this came out during my I don't like dramas phase. So I just immediately did not watch it. But Firstly, I would just like to say this totally counts as a sports movie. I consider MMA a sport, kind of like how we argued that Die Hard is a Christmas movie. This is definitely a sports movie. You're completely okay to say this is your favorite sports movie. I will not be mad. I was wondering why I knew the name Gavin O'Connor, so I was looking it up. He did The Accountant and The Way Back, which are two movies that I heard were good that I need to see, but I have not seen.
They're very good.
It looks like, oh, he also did Miracle. So okay, so I have at least seen one movie he has done because I have seen Miracle. I wanted to try and see if I could make a comparison for the director, but um yeah, so that's now look at you. You actually managed to, although to be fair, there's a couple movies on this list on your list I haven't seen, but at least number one I have not seen. I will definitely make sure to watch this one. Um I know you. I forget when you recommended it, but there was a point at which you were like, "Hey, man, you should watch this. It's really good." And even you describing it right there, like you make it sound really good. So I like Nick Nolte. I like Hardy. Just out of curiosity, was Hardy still in his mumble phase? Like, does he speak? That sounds really bad, but is it Baney? Is it Mad Max Fury Roady?
He has a very heavy Philly accent because it takes place in Philadelphia. So he does talk kind of funny, but his traps are insane in this movie. He was bulking to get into the role of Bane, and he just looks like a tank in this movie. And I was surprised because I don't picture Joel Edgerton as like a particularly like fit individual, but like in this movie, I mean, because like MMA, you're basically in like a speedo or whatever, but like he's pretty ripped, and I just don't think of him as like a ripped actor. But I saw him in that, and I was like, you know, he could potentially be like a good like action lead or something, but it's just not something I would have thought of.
Did you see Tom Hardy in Legend?
I have not. I saw the trailer for that when I was about to come out, but I have not seen that actual movie.
Okay. The then never mind. The comparison doesn't really work. The For some reason in my head, whenever I think of like the penultimate Tom Hardy, I go to Legend, and I don't know why. It makes zero sense. He's done a million other movies that are bigger than that, but for some reason, whenever I think of like the Tom, I just go to Legend. So I was curious, but yeah, even still, you make the movie sound really good. The Warrior pitch worked on me.
One last thing I'll say that's great about it, like I said, it's like these two brothers that have two totally different perspectives of how they grew up. Because, like I said, they broke up. The family broke up, and one went with the one with the other, and they both need money for different reasons. Is everyone I've talked to basically like there's an even distribution of like quote unquote like sides. Like I even watched it with like my own brother the first time, and like immediately after we didn't talk the whole movie, and then afterwards we were talking about it, and it was like, oh well, Tom Hardy, totally, because I'm not going to say who wins, but it's like, oh, Tom Hardy, blah blah blah. And then my brother was like, well, no, Joel Edgerton, blah blah blah. So like even then it's like immediately it creates that good conversation about like which brother's in the right and which brother needed the money more.
Ooh, okay. Well, now I really want to watch it. As I mentioned earlier, I love movies with a good philosophical quandary where when the movie ends, it still doesn't end. You're going to be talking about it for a while afterwards. That I like that.
Exactly.
So my number one, honestly, it's the exact same as you said. When people say, "What's your under the radar recommendation?" This is the one I recommend. This is definitely one of my top five favorite movies of all time. I have no problem saying that. It is 2013's Don John. And this movie was written, directed, and stars Joseph Gordon-Levitt. So this was his baby. This was his like magnum opus, and it's just awesome. I already liked Joseph Gordon-Levitt, which is why I watched this movie initially. I honestly didn't know what it was about. I just saw that he was attached, and I was like, I am game. Then when I found out he wrote and directed it after the fact, it just made me like him more. So real quick, just to give a little bit of a synopsis. So Joseph Gordon-Levitt plays the titular Don John, who is just your really like average guy. He's living in the city. He works at a bar. He goes to the gym. He goes to church. He's kind of just like the average family man's not the right word because he doesn't have a family, but like, you know, he does go to visit his parents. His dad is Tony Danza, and his sister's Brie Larson, just randomly. Um, like she literally I think she has one line in the entire movie. She's just on her phone the whole time, just randomly Brie Larson's in it. But yeah, just they try to set up that Don John is the most average guy ever. However, or I should say most relatable guy ever. However, he has a porn addiction. And so the point of the movie is he describes what it's like to have a porn addiction. Then he meets Scarlett Johansson, who's the other main character. They start dating. But then it talks about the struggles of dating somebody when you have a porn addiction. But then the part that makes me like it so much is he's kind of trying to get his life together, so he starts going to night school. And while at night school, he meets Julianne Moore's character. Now, Julianne Moore is significantly older, but so he falls in love, quote unquote, with Scarlett Johansson because she's attractive. She looks like the porn stars that he's used to, you know, doing it to. But when he meets Julianne Moore, he actually learns the true meaning of love because they're like these kindred souls that can't they end up becoming really good friends. They, you know, they like kind of bond together. She's going through a divorce. Actually, sorry, I think her husband passed away. And he's like dealing with this addiction and it's sent him into a depression. And so they kind of like are bonding together, but they also have a bunch in common. And so he kind of learns like the beauty of, I don't want to say true love, but like just yes, really it's more like it's Scarjo is trying to break him this addiction, nothing's working, and what breaks him of the addiction is like life, if that makes sense. Like life hits him in the face, he meets this wonderful woman, and like she ends up is the one that does it. And so, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be porn. He like chose to tell this story through the lens of a porn addiction, but it really you no matter the addiction, you can relate to it. He has friends, he has family, he's trying to date, and he has an addiction. And I just think the story is wonderful. It's great. He like narrates the story, so of course people are still talking and whatnot, but his narration is really good. It's very witty. It's designed to be like a romance drama, but there's also comedy to it. So it's not lighthearted. Like there are some really depressing moments, but they're then followed up by really lighthearted moments, and so it kind of makes it worth it. It's a roller coaster, but overall, this is one of my top 5 favorite movies. I will forever recommend this as like an under the radar pick. I finally bought it like a year ago. I found it in that $1 bin I mentioned that I like to go sifting through, and I was very happy because this was the one I needed to finish off my collection.
All right, so you did not go 6 for 6. I have seen this movie, and I also really enjoy it. I always respect when someone like, A, writes and directs, but also just like writes, directs, and stars, makes it feel like sort of like a one-man show in that regard. I really respect that. And I think Joseph Gordon-Levitt did this exceedingly well. Um, Everything that you said, it's just great. It's a smart script. It's like it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's just a very interesting story. It feels really original, especially in like how it's structured. But it also just has like a lot to say, like you said, like, it has a lot to say about like modern relationships. Like even, in his relationship with Scarlett Johansson, it's like she has unreasonable expectations about like him. And it sort of talks about how like, in modern society, like men tend to think that relationships are about, physical appearance and wanting a girl that's hot. And then because they're so like, into like porn and things like that. But then like women have this unfair expectation of men because they, see rom-coms and romance movies and romance novels and they think men are supposed to be these like prince charmings that like wait on them hand and foot. So it's sort of like how they both have unfair expectations about the other, and it's sort of like it's commenting on like society as a whole, how men have one expectation of relationships and women have another, and neither is right or particularly healthy. So I just think, yeah, like you said, he decided to tell it through that lens of like a porn addiction. But I think it's just like a really great commentary just on like relationships and society in general.
I agree completely. I don't think I could have said it better myself. And I also want to double down on the fact that it's awesome that he wrote, directed, and stars in it. I feel like, generally speaking, the like average fan or I guess society that like in the movie audience tends to look down on when an actor writes and directs. I've heard a lot of people say, "Oh, it's really hard for an actor to be able to like give himself criticism if he's also the director or if he's also writing." But I tend to disagree. I want to repeat what I said when we were talking about like the bottle stories with like as little actors as possible with a little set. I think the same can be said for writing, acting, directing. I think that it can very easily bomb, don't get me wrong, but it's a high risk, high reward where if you do it right, it's that much more impressive.
For sure. And I think this was one of the last movies he did before he kind of dropped off. I know he dropped off for
Yeah.
like a while.
He went on a little hiatus, and this was definitely I want to say he did. I'm gonna double check this. I think he did one more movie after this and then dropped off, but I'm going to double check that.
I
Let's
think
see
he
here.
did he did I don't know
Si-
if Premium Rush was the same year or afterwards.
Premium Rush was right before Don John. He did Sin City, A Dame to Kill For, and then that's when he didn't do another movie, so he took a year off. He did Snowden in 2016.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
he did a couple random TV shows, some voiceover here or there, and then it looks like he comes back in 2020 with Project Power. So, like he didn't necessarily leave, but if I remember correctly, he just wanted to take a mini break from Hollywood. But I guess it was technically after Snowden.
Another underrated, under the radar, based on true events movie that I enjoy.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I'm going to plug it again. He is currently filming Beverly Hills Cop 4, where he will be playing the like young cop being trained by Axel Foley, Eddie Murphy, as like the gritty cop, and it's going to be like a classic. I'm going to compare it to like a Lethal Weapon, where I'm sure Eddie Murphy will be like, "Oh, I'm getting too old for this," and Joseph Gordon-Levitt's like, "Come on, man, keep up." But like that has me very excited.
No way, he is the best Robin in live action we've ever gotten.
I definitely, this, in my opinion, is not a hot take. I really wish that we would have gotten the planned Robin spin-off movie. Don't get me wrong, I know why Bale and Nolan did not continue after Dark Knight Rises. However, he had apparently, I don't know if he completed the script, but he did complete like the general storyline, the like the outline, like the piece for piece as far as where the different points would be. So like we know what the story would be, and it's cool. I wish we could have gotten it. I think that I would have loved to have another jaunt through that universe.
I agree, and he's a great actor as well, and I guess now a great writer and director.
Yes. And the other one that he's done was a TV show on Apple TV called Mr. Corman. That's the one I was trying to find. He's only he did Don John. That was like the magnum opus, and then that's just kind of it. But then when he came back to Hollywood, he did Mr. Corman, a deep cut into the days and nights of a public school teacher in the San Fernando Valley. I have not seen this. I don't know if it's any good. I don't have Apple TV Plus, but I just remember being like, "Oh, he's doing another one where he's writing into the." But yeah, so that was figured worth mentioning.
Sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking with me again. Hope everybody enjoyed.